This podcast is powered by PKF. PKF, your trusted advisor in the Hunter for over 45 years. Down to Business acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters this podcast is recorded on.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Down to Business. I'm your host, Andrew Beattie. Sensational guest today, and I might just read a bit of a bio that I probably had to summarise, to be honest, but an American former rugby league player, we'll get to that in a minute, amassing 273 first-grade games across various clubs, including his beloved Newcastle Knights. From a very famous sporting family, Novocastrian. He is now an ambassador to many charities, the Chief Executive Officer of the Rugby League Players Association, a husband, a father of three beautiful girls. Joining me today, we've got Clint Newton. Welcome, Clint.
Hi, Andrew.
Mate, thanks for coming on board. I want to hit on that the American. Why don't we start there in the background? What's the story there, mate?
Yeah, obviously my father was playing on the pro tour at the time. He was getting ready for the US Open.
So I might just say, for those that don't know, Jack Newton, I mean, anyone here in Newcastle would, but Clint's famous dad, Jack Newton, PGA.
Yeah, so Dad was, the way the family used to operate was, and travel was, if Dad was on the US tour, they'd be based in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. If he was playing on the European tour, they'd be based in London, where my mum was from. And if he was playing on the Australasian tour, he'd be in Warners Bay. So at that time, the US Open was on, and we were based in the US for a few years, and I just happened to arrive on US soil, and proudly dual citizen, and had the ability to play for the mighty US Tomahawks in the World Cup, and it's been a big part of our life, obviously.
Yeah, great experience.
Oh, absolutely. I think that one of the best thing is that, we've got the ability to hold three passports with my mum's English and obviously being in the US and having citizenship there, and then Australia. So travel's always been a big part of our family, like when Dad was obviously on the tour, and then when he retired from the tour due to his accident, and then was commentating, we had the ability to travel a bit with him, which at the time you don't kind of realise what it's actually going to do to you. But I think being exposed to so many things at a young age, and having to adapt as well. Like, my mum was obviously incredibly resilient with two kids on the tour, and then travelling around. There was no nannies weren't really a thing back then. There weren't creches at courses. There was smoking sections on planes, which Dad was a horrendous smoker for many years. So she had to do it all herself, whilst also trying to do her best to support Dad. So
yeah, it's amazing, and I've met your mum. I know what a lovely lady and resilient, as you said, how resilient she is. But like that, obviously experience, and I guess cultural experience at a young age. It's pretty rare, probably a bit more common these days, but back then, I mean, how has that opened up, I guess, your eyes and the way you've lived life, not only during rugby league days and taking opportunities, but also now, and how you play it out in general, whether it be career or family yourself?
Yeah, I think, as I said, at the time you don't realise it, because I think where people get confused is that if your child can't articulate what they're seeing, and they believe that, well, we've got to get them to an age where they're going to be able to remember everything and talk about it when they get older. Now, yes, I can to a certain point, but I think the point gets missed is the fact that just purely exposing, children to other areas, other environments, other cultures, adapting to getting on and off, airlines, if that's part of the gig, which it was for our family, having to be exposed to all different people from all walks of life and different cultures, listening, I think that's all of those things at the time. You're probably not realising what it's doing to you, but what it is it's shaping, how you think, feel and behave in different environments. And there's certain things that, there's levels of expectation, in those. So there were no iPads, mobile phones, so you had to be creative, you had to, work through. There was lots of, late business meetings and dinners and things like that you had to go to. And there was often times when we're, put under the table, with a jumper and fall asleep there until we're ready to go, and so again, I think it all comes back to cultural experience, levels of resilience, but also, having to understand that you had to be patient, you had to be respectful, and you had to. One of the key things I think my parents taught me and my sister at a young age was that if someone helped you or helped us with regards to whether it was going and seeing a show or and this wasn't about getting freebies. This was about just helping us get something or get somewhere or something that was over and above any type of expectation. Was they would always make me write a letter and card, and that was from the age of when I could write. I wasn't a good writer or speller, so I had to get plenty of checks from mum and dad. But at 10, 11, 12, 13, up till, I still do it now, where, physically writing, to people, putting it in the mail, sending it off, and them getting that, that's what they'd used to make me do. And at that point, you're going, why are we doing, I don't want to do this, it's boring or, whatever, but they were staunch in saying, sit down and you're going to write to this person because they've done something for you and you need to say thank you. And now it sort of all makes sense, as you get older. And I do it, to our family as well now.
Mm. Yeah, well, letter writing itself is a lost art, mate.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about your dad, and obviously, for most people can have a look, need to know no introduction. But what was life? I mean, you mentioned something about the travel and the different experience, but what was life generally like growing up with being part of Jack Newton's family, famous?
Yeah, again, I think that at the time when you're in it, you're not fully taking in what's going on because the reality is he's just dad to me and my sister, and I think because he cut across so many different people, there was always that level of normality with him. So whether it was meeting Princess Diana or the Queen or parliamentary dignitaries, being close with Bob Hawke or other PMs, or mixing it with someone down at the Burwood that lives in a housing commission. It didn't matter, so therefore there was never, in my view, for our family, this sense of entitlement because of the way in which both my mother and father, sort of moved amongst the community. Particularly given the fact they had very strong ties to charities and foundations and establishing the Jack Newton Junior Golf, Foundation in 1986, being a part of, establishing what is now the Jack, which obviously PKF sponsor now, which was started in 1979. So that was, growing up, it was, again, I mean, I was tremendously lucky that I had two loving parents. Dad worked extremely hard, to provide for us. I was lucky enough that I still had a dad after his accident, and but nothing was, nothing came easy. I think what people sometimes perceive as, you live in a nice house, which I was always grateful for, and you can put food on the table, which is fantastic, which I know many people don't have that luxury. But there's always challenge, again, and I think we particularly were made more aware of that because Dad was very, very conscious of not coming across as if he was influencing decisions on people. So I, never getting free handouts from people growing up when I was trying to play sport or rep teams or anything like that. He would always be off in the distance, never wanted to, engage in that space. I remember that, despite repeated requests to get a motorbike, it was a hard no. Horses was our thing, so it was riding a horse was as best as we could, which was great. but it was always something you had to work for it. Do your chores, get paid for doing work. Don't get free handouts. But I was lucky. I was really grateful that I had such fantastic parents, loving parents, deeply loyal and supportive. And I think the best thing about them was that they were always welcoming for people at our home. There was always parties at home, lots of people coming round. So therefore, again, very collaborative, very community focused, which was something that I think certainly they instilled in us.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, obviously, your children are of varying ages, but all quite young. But there's some of the things you obviously try and carry forward.
Well, I think you are burying your head in the sand if you think that your kids don't watch on intently, with what you do. And so, again, at that time, I'm not realising what's going on, but watching the way in which Dad worked and worked hard, the way he would negotiate, the way he would engage with people like your Packers, your Christopher Skase, and the like. Your Singos of the world, where they could have a genuine blow up, and I'd be playing with my GI Joes outside his office and listening, to everything that's going on. At the time, you don't realise it, but then they'd have these massive blow up, which would sort of, your ears would prick up. But then by the end of the conversation, they're going, right, so when are we having a beer, or when are we going for lunch, or, those types of things. And then, having a mother that was so resilient, so determined to keep our family together and providing for not just me and my sister, but anyone that came into our house. You watch all that. And again, you may not be able to articulate how you think and feel, but you feel it and you watch it, and then you try and take it in. And you want to instill those values in, obviously, your kids moving forward.
No, that's great. I mean, just imagine the upbringing to some of the names you mentioned there. It's quite surreal. But so how then, from going from the upbringing and travelling around, etc., how'd the sport that you had your success in and etc. become rugby league? How'd you fall into that?
Well, I certainly didn't fall into it. I was never much good as a younger player. I was always too small to play rugby league. My father and mother both were determined not to let me play rugby league. I'd had to go at every sport. That was again a great thing about our family. Dad was always very much about you give it a go, and you're not going to quit until you've given it a red hot crack. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. But you're not going to say that you don't like it after one attempt or two attempts. You're going to go and you're going to learn the skill, and then you can decide whether you want to pursue it beyond that. And again, I'm incredibly fortunate that that was the mindset, because then as you grow older, you can play tennis, maybe not great, but you can play, and you can play cricket, and you can play golf, and you can swim properly, and you can go surfing, and you can do all those different things, play soccer. Sport was such a massive part of our family, because Dad really believed in the fact that sport is something that should be. It's not, unfortunately, it's not always, based on just pure values around integrity and trust and honesty and teamwork and collaboration and being able to adapt, to the circumstances in different environments, different people. You're not always going to like your teammates. You're not always going to like your coach. Golf was a big thing for him, about scoring on the card and playing with older people, where you could be 12 and have a handicap of 18 or 20 or whatever it is, and playing with someone that's 65. And you need to demonstrate respect. You need to have a chat with them post round, during the round, like all those types of things. So I didn't play until I was turning 12, and I just played soccer, during the winter. Played for Valentine Devils, and I really just got brought, just went there because of the friends that I had at school. We went to St Mary's Gateshead, St Mary's Warners Bay originally, and then St Mary's Gateshead. I was just desperate to play. You'd be playing tackle at school, down in the back where teachers couldn't see you.
Yeah.
And then I went and played. Now I was playing third division. At that point, I'd go to training with some of the best players in our team, which I was really fortunate to have close friends there that weren't just disregarding me as a person or a human being just purely because of my rugby league capabilities.
Yeah, sure.
Which I think was critical in me maintaining the desire to continue to play. I think that's one of the key things that people need to understand is the influence that if you're bringing up good kids and those kids understand the value of fairness and respect and bringing people in and helping them and not just gauging your level of friendship on someone's athletic ability. I think that the impact is, for me, that's me. So because of the way in which people treated me, particularly the best players in the team, that allowed me to keep going. Whereas if they were nasty and they were disrespectful and they'd shun you purely because you couldn't play, and I was bad, I was terrible, then maybe I'm not going to continue. I couldn't say the same for some of the parents that were around the club, where they seemed still fixated in the view that because I'm not any good, why am I going to continue playing? The comments that would be made when I'm just going to the canteen to get a bag of Red Frogs and a can of Coke is shouldn't you just go and play golf? You're better at that than rugby league. So why would you do this? Now I'm 12, 13, 14, and you're just thinking, well, no, I don't want to play golf. I can play golf. I love this. And so I want to play this. And yeah, I'm not that good, but that's okay. And I'm going to keep going and, go and train, ride my bike from, where we live at Cardiff, at 5 a.m. down to, the gym down at Wallsend that they had there. I forget what it was called, but you'd wake up, ride my BMX down there at 5 a.m, 12, 13, 14, go to the gym, train, get sessions from the Knights or, when they came into the competition, the Mariners, and you wouldn't get selected to trial necessarily, but I'd ask for programs because I'd say, well, if they're doing it, I want to do it. I'm not asking for you to select me, but I want to go and train or research or talk to people at the gym, and say, well, what do you think I should be, training? So at a young age, my father was very big on, you've always got to ask questions, no matter how stupid other people may think they are. You need to know what you want to know. And you can only do that by asking questions.
Yeah.
And that's really how it came about. And then, I finally, got my shot in the Knights, which was really just by luck, or a bit of luck. But, it was just that sort of sliding doors moment where I had I won the Player of the Year in the Hunter Academy, which was largely my first ever rep team, which is where I met Kurt Gids, where we became great mates. And from there, you had to go, and then I got picked because I got the Player of the Year. We then got picked in a national team, from an academy side of things. And just on that day that the national team was coming together was the Knights trials. I genuinely believe I would never have been picked if I played in those trials because of some of the the garbage that goes on around, that bloke needs to play because he was picked last year, or he's just not up to it, or whatever.
Yeah, it's harder to get out than get in.
Yeah, the influence that goes on with some of those selectors. And I got told, no, you need to go to that national, and we'll put you in the summer squad. Don't worry about trialling, but you won't make the team type language. We'll just put you in for your development. I was like, bullshit. What do you mean I'm not going to make the team? In my head, obviously, I wasn't going to cut my nose off to spite my face at that point. But in my head, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but Thank you. It's great that you've given me a shot, but I'm going to get after it. And I just train really hard. I put on like 10 kilo in the off season. I tore both my groins one of the first sessions because I'd put on too much weight. But that had come from, again, the rigorous way in which my diet was, eating every 2 hours. I was very fortunate that my mum would pack my lunch, every day, and I'd get sledged repeatedly about that. But I'd carry my lunch bag everywhere. Even if I went to the pub and we were going, to have a drink, it's there because I want to eat, the right food. Or if I'm going playing golf, I'm not having a pie on the round. I'm going to eat my, chicken sandwich and my yogurt and the fruit and whatever. Didn't stop me from having a beer, but that was the way I wanted to, get ahead, and then you make it.
So you got, like that's very structured. I think what I guess if I look at, it's probably unfair to say today's generation because it's probably every generation. There wouldn't be too many people that had that, focus, plan, and I guess aptitude to carry it out. So, I think the one thing that I look, whether it be sport, business, whatever, if you want to achieve something, you can, but it's have you got the desire and dedication, I guess, to actually push through with it.
Well, I think there's many excuses that you can find of why not. There's an excuse there because people tell you can't do it. Well, okay, let's believe that. Well, where do I end up? Like, I'm not here. So again, there's lots of sort of get out clauses, you could say, that people will provide you along the way. This is too hard. The training's too tough. You've been injured. Someone's been picked ahead of you. You haven't got that promotion. You don't like the boss. You don't like this. It's a little bit too far for you to travel. The traffic's not good enough. There's so many things that you can put in your way if you let them. That will stop you from actually achieving what you wanted. I mean, for me, it was just laser focus on, I want to be there, and it doesn't matter what people say. Yes, at times you're sitting there going, this is too hard. But they're fleeting moments, and then you snap out of it and go, what am I talking about here? No, I want that. And I think that was the part when I was in my bedroom, I'd have stuff all around the walls, motivational stuff, or I'd write my goals on the walls. And this started at 13, 14, 15, or I'd have a book that I've still got where I'd have like headlines of me, maybe, like if I'd make the nights or whatever, like, young kid does good, or, Newton makes the grade and all that. And that was at 15, 16. And that was when I would have been 1,000,000 to 1 and blowing at that point to do it. But I think that, at the time, like, my father was very big on, the mental side of things of the game. He would sit in the toilet on tour and read, psychocybernetics, which was just, mindset coaches and, psychs for sport was not a thing. You would be considered crazy, and put it in a straitjacket probably if you were looking at that space.
Our times have changed.
Yeah, and so therefore, because you had that, and I wasn't a good reader, it'd take me, half an hour to read one page, but you get through it, and ultimately, the more you see and the more again, I'm a big believer in that, and I can only speak on what I've done and what I've felt, and I think in those moments when you're struggling that, you're struggling to put your shoes on in the morning because you feel like you've had a shit of a day or whatever, and then you look up and you go, oh, no, that's why I'm doing it, or whatever it is that is going to motivate you. But I think that was very much part of my life.
Yeah, well, one of my favourite quotes: if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's pretty much what you're saying. I think 100%. Whether it be, we look at a lot in business too, and these days there are a lot of coaches. Like, well, you got to be careful because everyone's a coach, but a lot of mindset stuff, which as you said, probably not yesteryear, but a big part of today. So, mate, before your time. So we could talk about your rugby league career all day, but I want to get on to some of your other stuff as well. But it's important to say, what did rugby league instill in you, I guess, especially when you made it into, the more elite levels? What sort of skills do you think you take away and you're now using in life beyond rugby league?
Well, I think the biggest thing, particularly from what I see now in our players, and now you're sort of you're looking through a different type of lens. Like again, when you're in it, it's your normal, right? You know, so. But what it is teaching you is so many things that are incredibly important in business and in life and in relationships. So what rugby league provided was the opportunity to say, right, well, you have to have relationships with people that you may not like, you know, or relationships become an incredibly important part of the way in which you go about things. So if my relationship isn't good with, you know, an Andrew Johns who's your halfback, who's the main ball player, or a Danny Badiris who is there, you know, and I learnt that very early on, where even when I left Valentine and, you know, at 15, and usually people would go to lakes, one of my best friends was Dean Griffiths, and he was the hooker. And I thought, well, one, we're great mates. Two, his father played for South. Three, Souths were not as good as Lakes, so I'm going to get a better shot at South to play more and more game time. I'm probably going to be behind the blokes that I was behind at Valentine, and I'm going to get the ball because I'm best friends with the hooker. You know, and so therefore you develop that. Then you have the ability to say, right, it's hard. You know, everything's hard, but you know, it's hard. You know, to be at the elite level, you're going to have a lot of the skills that are required to be at the elite level. You know, and that's no different to anyone that's at the elite level, whether they're the CEO or in the sort of C-suite area, or they're the best in class at various things. You're going to have, you know, a deep conviction to want to get it done, and so the fact that you needed that determination, you needed to have that hard grit, discipline, again, the ability to communicate was important, and having the resilience, I think, is arguably the most critical part of it, is to understand that it is going to be hard, but you are going to have to overcome it however you need to, and understand that you're probably not going to be able to get through everything on your own, which then comes back to why relationships become important. Because if you're a prick, you know, to people, and you cannot build relationships, when it is hard, it is going to be, you know, multiplied massively, because you are going to do it on your own, and you will not get through things on your own. I don't care how hard, you know, how tough you think you are. There are things that you will not be able to get through unless you have a team around you, or unless you have, you know, the support.
And that still plays out, you know, well beyond rugby league, obviously, you know, and you know, in various roles you play now, you've got challenging times and those people you can lean on and use as support.
Well, I mean, I look at what I do now. If I don't have a good team, and we don't have a good team, and if I don't have a good board, if I don't have good leaders in Clubland, if we don't have good advisors, we don't get the outcomes that players deserve, and the game benefits from. So, you know, again, that's really been. It's probably sometimes it's a strength that, like anything, a strength overused can become a weakness. But I'm very big on collaboration because I want to be able to learn. And I think the harder it gets, the more skilled people then you need to put around you, and having the humility to be able to say, I don't know that, and that's okay, you know, and because no one knows everything. And I think having an understanding about what you do know, what you don't know, and having a good network, which then comes back to, again, relationships. How do people potentially help you? You may not be able to pay them. You may not be able to offer them, you know, something that they may desire or whatever. And getting people to play a role for you for the greater good without any self-interest at all. You know, that's hard.
Well, it is, but I think you would probably attest to this, that I think most people want to help. You might have to work with timing and the rest of it, but, in my experience, most people genuinely want to help. The hardest thing people do is they assume and therefore they don't ask, But I think what you're reiterating is, well, as you said before, you got to ask questions. Ask of people, can you help? How can you help, etc. And opportunities come.
Well, and understand that rejection is going to be part of that, and don't take it personally. I think that's the key, and I learnt that at a very young age, rejection, where I tried out for heaps of teams, and back in those days, the way in which you would get rejection is via a letter that would always start with "thank you." The moment that was on the letter, I'm done. And then one day you get something that says congratulations, and then you go, well, unless they're
where's the thank you?
Yeah, unless they're going to change congratulations on receiving this letter, but thank you, you haven't got it, or something like that. But I think that that's certainly a big part of it, is understanding that not everyone's going to want to help you. Not everyone has the capacity to help you. But if you, again, are able to speak openly and honestly, no bullshit, and just tell them what you need and how they can be helpful, I think, like you said, most people want to help. And that's the biggest thing that I've found, particularly in what I've just gone through, the quality of human beings that were part of this process that we've gone through. Not only were they incredibly intelligent and skilled and insightful and industry leaders in their chosen field, but they were bloody good people. And there's no way we can get outcomes in that space by, if I just said, I know everything, I'm going to do it my way, and that's the way, because I don't have the capacity to say, I don't know. And that's, again, go right back as a youngster where you're actually asking the questions rather than just believing your own shit around going, well, I do know.
Righteousness, yeah. No, mate, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, we could do a whole, series of discussions on rugby league, but I think the one thing I want to get out of that, rather than the specifics of rugby league, is really, you had laser focus, but you also, as you said, you've had, end up where you think you're on a path, and then all of a sudden you go, well, hey, I've got to go to another club or whatever it may be. But, the upside of that is through, as you said, probably relationships and asking of opportunities, etc., is where it's led you to, broadening your network and broadening your footprint, and in the UK, and ultimately meeting your wife and this sort of thing. So, I guess, how has it led to opportunities and, I guess, continual learning? A lot of people finish rugby league and they got nothing. And not just rugby league, that could be anything. But you've used that to your advantage, and hence we are now.
Yeah, I think that for me, the decisions that I've always made were based around, my values, my personal beliefs, and sort of the deeply embedded principles that my family had set. So I don't really think you can go wrong when you do that. I think there's going to be moments when you make a decision that is a values-based decision that can bring you some pain, initially. But I also think that helps you then with regards to the way in which people may be able to see you, is the fact that, well, he said this to me or he did this, but like you've got to work through that is, well, I don't really care. If that's what you think, then that's on you. I made these decisions based on those reasons, and again, come back to the people that you're surrounding yourself with that are going to help, maybe advise through that process. My father was obviously, very big on, making decisions on integrity and standing firm on that. Now that means that there's often confrontation in that, but not be afraid of that and putting yourself in an uncomfortable position where at times you are going to have to push back. If you are saying yes to everything, you are ultimately you are not in control of the outcomes that you want. Nor is it actually going to help you in the short, medium, or long term, because you're going to feel internally that you're giving your power all the way, to someone else, and the fact that you're going to walk away from that conversation filthy at yourself that you've said yes to something when you knew it wasn't the right way to go about it, but you felt like, I don't want to have confrontation, I don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation that is going to come with this, and I may lose a friend, or I may lose someone here, and I think that, again, having that mentality where you have lots of disagreements, whether it was during the different challenges that you'd have internally with the team, I wasn't, looking back, you're not always right, but at the time, with the info I had and the way in which I wanted to go about it with principles, with values and integrity, that'd be, whether it's challenging, Joeys of the world or BK or whatever. And I wasn't always right, at all. And you look back and you go, I was wrong on that. But at that point, you're making it based on that.
Well, you're basing your awareness.
Yeah, and so that was no different to leading into the decisions to go to Melbourne. That decision was kind of taken away from me, but it came about through standing up for what I believed in the way in which players were being treated. And that led to a fallout, going to Melbourne based on principle, not on money, where I had big offers from everywhere else. I just wanted to go to somewhere that actually wanted me, and to get me back to a place where I was, loved rugby league again. And then making a decision to go to England for, again, less money, but for the challenge, and to go somewhere that was requiring a transformation in the whole Kingston Rovers, and then obviously being fortunate enough to meet my wife, and which has now given us 3 amazing girls. And then the same thing happened with Penrith. Getting an opportunity to go back based on the role in which I was required to play. And then the decisions that you make along the way then led me to finish my career at my childhood club on minimum wage, because of the fact that you'd made these decisions along the way that were principle and values based, that at the time brought some pain, and there was some uncertainty. We didn't know, how things were going to end. When I'm finished at Newcastle on a Monday with no club to go to, and you're going, well, what
do you do?
What am I doing? Next thing, the phone call comes at 9:00 that night from Bellamy, and I'm on a flight 24 hours later to Melbourne. So, again, at the time, you don't have a crystal ball, but I believe that if you make those decisions with that mindset, I think more often than not, it's going to end up the right thing.
Yeah, well, it's mindset, and it's energy is a big part of this too. So, mate, I think you're stressing the point that where you're coming from, your values, but the opportunities that they do present. So fast forward, and we're missing a lot. I get it, but fast forward to CEO, RLPA. Love a photo shot in the media, mate. Yeah, but what's some of the things now that I guess? Because you're fairly young by any standards of a CEO, I guess, and you're representing, quite a cohort and a lot of, money, a lot of profile, all this sort of stuff. How were you at negotiating before you went in this role, and what's some of the things that you think you've learned on the way to be a good negotiator now?
Again, I think for me, negotiation was always coming from a place of, genuinely, what do you need? Our family was never really about, asking for way more than, really what you need. And Dad was always very fair. He was a hard, negotiator. And that was no different to when he was dealing with you, as I said, with your Packers and Scases, and dealing with, big companies like IMG and James Erskines of the world that were, tremendous people that were with IMG, that were managing high-profile, golfers. But again, Dad had such a great relationship with James, outside of that. But it was coming from a place of principle and recognising your value. So, I mean, my father did all my contracts when I was young, and then basically I did. I effectively did my renewal of my contract in England. I did the Penrith deal, by myself. I did my Newcastle. I had one agent that when Dad didn't know much about the English Super League that got me to England, but then that was it. So, and I always came from that position of understanding my worth, taking an interest in the industry. So you go, what are these types, asking questions? What are these people, on? But then my thing was, I always knew that I was never, in the top couple of percent, but I knew that I would bring something else to the team, which was the professional standards. I would invest in younger people. I'd invest in players to try and make them better. So if in rugby league, when you've got a finite amount of money with a salary cap, you can't put everyone on, necessarily what they're actually worth. And the good clubs don't. The good clubs will buy someone or put someone on their roster that they see an upside in. And for me, my sale was, well, if that player's worth 100K, I reckon I can make him worth 200 or 150 or whatever. So whatever you're going to pay me, factor that in too. So, and if you can have an influence on a team that then is making someone's value more, however possible, whether that's, as I said, setting various standards, investing in, younger kids, being disciplined, the way you train, having the locker room type discussions about what they're reading, how they're sleeping, like all of those types of things, was it. And then you obviously, I was part of many negotiations prior to that, where I was on the board for the RLPA at 22, and when Butsy was the CEO. So again, experiencing that, knowing that I had really no idea like what was going on, but listening, learning, seeing what, the push-pulls that happen, exposing yourself to it repeatedly, and then being a part of the, every CBA negotiation effectively that has existed since 2003. Again, you had the history and the IP of where we'd come from, and then why do we need to be here? And again, putting some quality people around you that complement the skills that you have, but they are supercharged in some other areas. And that's why I go back to the team that I'm fortunate to have around me. Was a tremendous team, that where we all complemented, each other. But again, it still comes back to having, a deep conviction in the fact that what we are going after is underpinned by values, principle, integrity, and really it's about the people. If you look after the people, then everyone benefits.
And I think, like with any good negotiation, I think a good negotiation is where both parties can walk away and say, we've had a win, not we've got the better of someone else.
I think sometimes people are not going to see it as a win though first up. That's the difficulty. So sometimes winning, which is why sometimes that can be a difficult way to manage negotiations, because sometimes people in negotiations don't see the result as the win at the time. Like my job is just, all I can focus on is getting the best outcome based on the information I have, and for the reasons that we believe in. And then hopefully, if it's, yes, ideally you want them to feel like they've won, but I truly believe that then if they don't see it straight away, it will be, in the future at some point.
Yep. Look, I mean, not to digress too much, we've got a lot of topics we could talk about. A few more, but on leadership. You've been in, not just in RLPA, like as you said, taking a leadership role in playing, You sit on various charities as ambassadors, etc. The Jack Newton Foundation, etc. Like, what does leadership mean to you, and what do you, I guess, try and play out, in a leader sense yourself?
Yeah, I think leadership, it depends on the circumstances, because it can come in many different forms, right? For me, what I experienced, particularly more recently, is that you need to be a different type of leader. And that doesn't mean to say that you change your values, you change your principles, you change the way in your beliefs. But different people require different leadership at various times. And also, particularly if you're dealing with multiple stakeholders, leadership comes in many ways. So if you're leading a group of effectively 900 male and female rugby league players, they will require a type of leader that engages them, that is able to demonstrate the values or the behaviours in which they're going to align with. And then internally in your team, you're going to have to be the same type of leader, but a different leader, because you're going to then have to lead individuals inside your team and then the team, and then you've got, again, a public-facing leadership where it's different again, and then at the negotiating table, that's a different type of. So there are, I think leadership is one of those things for me that you almost become like a chameleon. You don't change structurally, but you have to change colour, based on the circumstances that you're in and the environment. So again, you're not changing, but you are adapting to what is required at that point, which I think some people can get confused around. Well, that's the way I lead there, and that's the way I'm going to lead, with everything. You go, well, you're not. In my view, I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying, but I don't know whether then you're adapting to the circumstances again, and adapting just might mean a change of language, or a change of tone or whatever. That's in my view, the leadership is having the capacity and the humility, and I'd suggest the self and social awareness around what is required, at that time, because leadership can be showing a tremendous amount of compassion towards someone, and another leader, and then leadership can require standing firm and having a red hot crack at someone over something that you deeply believe in. That's all leadership. It's just different based on the circumstances.
Very, very good point. Look, we've got things we could talk about all day, but I'm going to cut to some pretty good ones around biggest mistake and ultimately biggest or best lesson.
Biggest mistake, I think, was my biggest mistake was believing that and I think it comes from childhood. It comes from pretty like a deep place where you believe that you could please everyone. Well, you can't, and I think that's probably my biggest mistake, where I thought you have a mindset where I would start from a place of, I'm going to make everyone happy, because ultimately you don't want conflict. Yes, you adapt to it, and I'm absolutely happy to have it, but it's not the place where I start. So and probably the biggest mistake coupled with that, and the biggest lesson, is that believing that everyone will share the same values as you, and then feeling like you have the capacity to change them, and so therefore you can spend so much time on trying to change someone, or transform them, I should say, to maybe think and feel and behave like you. But then you're going, well, that's coming from somewhere that you may never even understand or never even truly, be able to be a part of. So I think they were the couple of key things, is feeling like, is having sort of some level of expectation of why can't people see the things that I see or that we see, or that, because, hey, don't you want everyone to work together, and don't you want, a world in which, everyone's going to benefit and we're all going to go up together. And, I think I think you just have to then bring it back into focus and say, well, yep, you can attempt to try and, which is then comes back to your negotiation. You can attempt to do, that, but ultimately there comes a point in time where it's sort of like, I would imagine it's kind of like someone, if you were trying to, save them, and they were drowning and they were going to drag you down, with them. Well, at some point you just got to let go, and go, well, that's it now. Whatever comes after that, whether it's, fierce confrontation or losing a friendship or whatever, or, having to, manage, some hostilities that may come your way, well, so be it. But at the end of the day, I still believe that, they're probably the couple of things that you're not going to please everyone. So if you're starting from that, I think you can start from a place of trying, when you're thinking about sort of certain things, but you're not.
Yeah.
And because different people are going to be motivated and have self-interest, and they're going to have some self-preservation as well. So therefore, if you push too hard, they're going to go, well, that's going to damage me, and I don't want that, and all those types of things. And then obviously believing that you can, having an expectation that, people share your vision or your beliefs or your values on things. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, well, you can only control you too, can't
Yep.
you? Best advice ever received?
I think, my father, gave, both mum and dad, gave me plenty of advice. I think one that probably stands out, the most for me was, Dad was always very big on, leave the world better than when you found it, and leave the place in which you are at, or the business you're in, or the team you're in, or leave it better than when you found it, because ultimately that's really the goal, right? Is that if you've come in and you've moved things forward, then you've had an impact. And that comes in many forms, right? So if you walk into it's probably also connected to my OCD around cleaning up certain things. But if you walk into someone's kitchen, or you're at a park or whatever, and there's a bit of rubbish there, well, just pick it up. Like, it's not that hard.
Whether you did or not.
And so therefore, like, I know that's very granular, and it's like, well, how is that? But it's always, that mindset of, well, if you can just leave it better, doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's the other part for me, that sort of having those unrelenting standards of, perfection. It's got to be 10 out of 10 or very close to it on everything, and then, having that, that sort of internal critic of, you didn't nail it. I think that's probably another thing. But I think if you can, if you strip it right back, and that's the mindset you have, then I reckon you can't go wrong.
Yeah, no, mate, great answer. Mate, as I said, we could talk all day, but I'm going to try and wrap a few of these points up. But there's some great ones there, and I mean, some of these people might think, well, they're a bit more personal than business. I think they're one and the same. Respect and saying thank you. No brainer, but it is a rare thing these days. Treat everyone the same, no matter what their walk in life. I guess that's what we grow up with, how you're treated. Collaboration, and with collaboration leads to learning, or learning opportunities. So a great one for especially for the business owners, put yourself out of your comfort zone. I like where you say sport-based, is based on values, and I think so is business and decision-making. Stick to your values. What are you about? I think a lot of people need to spend a bit of time first to actually establish that. You've had a very good grounding as you've been younger, which many may have, may not have. But what do you stand for, and do you run with that each day? I say this all the time, so I'm glad you said it. Need to ask the questions. You know, you're never wrong when asking a question, but you also miss opportunities if you don't. So, as you said, the mindset and beliefs. You know, that's a big one, I think, for anyone. If you're not in that space, you probably need to look at. And with that, you said stop finding excuses. Oh, I love that, because we live in a very interesting world these days, and you know, if you thought it was hard back when you were looking now, there's more outs than a one-day cricket match. So, you know, the excuses one's really good. Interesting. We talk a lot on this podcast and blog about relationships, and you put in different lights saying not all relationships are ones you like, but it's still very important. You know, great point. And with that, the other thing about being able to communicate, some of these things you grabbed out of, you know, your sporting career, but what is very important in applying now, which with that leads to support, which gets you through resilience. You know, so if you run as a lone soldier, you probably need to look at a few things. For me, I think, you know, confrontation, you know, not great all the time, but it's inevitable. And without confrontation or conflict or debate, we don't get that, you know, best result or that next level of performance. So you said about researching, you know, great one for negotiation, making sure you know your value. And I think that value piece, what you said about not just direct value, but indirect value. You know, many business owners could look and say, what are we really offering, rather than just going on price. You know, so really good point. A couple of final ones, you know, the leadership comment, really good. And I took a lot out of that myself around, you know, stick to your values, but you need to adapt. And what kind of leader are you? I think you said don't change your structure, but you might have to change your colour. So really good analogy there. And a good leader has awareness both of self and you know, socially and around them and their team for that matter. So love the last couple of comments, mate. Can't please everyone, you know. And I'm not going to say don't try, but you know, be very wary. But and I'm glad you said this was one of your dads, because at last, but leave the world better than where you found it in any situation. I think that's a cracker, mate. So we might have to do another podcast on the lives and times of the Newtons. It sounds like there's some stories there.
Yeah, well, it's a R-rate. There's different versions, G, PG, MR. Yeah.
But, mate, look, you know, as I said, I think most audiences get a lot out of this. We've only scratched the surface. Really do value the time. Thanks for joining us on Down to Business.
No, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Till next time, guys. Here's cheers.